Hello and welcome back to the channel. My name is Dan and I'm here to bring you another FPL video. God, it feels good to be back. I've enjoyed the break, but I hope you have too, of course. I hope anyone who's had an exam period or anything like that, everything has gone positively for you. And of course, yeah, the summer break, very, very close. But the new FPL season looks like it's coming up around about next week. We should start seeing maybe some player price reveals later on this week. But the game should be launching next week, we hope. So plenty of tinkering to be done ahead of the new season. But I thought, what better way to kind of celebrate the game's launch shortly with essentially a fixture tier list, right? Like, we don't know the ins and outs of all the prices or the player positions. All we can do is speculate on that. But I thought I would rather have a tier list to refer back to as well, so that we kind of know really what teams we should be focused on, at least through game weeks 1 to 5. So if you're new to the game, or this is the kind of one of the first experiences of fantasy football, then at the beginning of the season we of course have unlimited transfers, so we can tinker to our heart's content, essentially swapping players around. But I would say when you have this ability to be able to make unlimited transfers, which we don't every week moving forward throughout the game, it makes the most sense to capitalize on as many game weeks ahead as possible, really. And that kind of, I think, threshold is usually around 5, 6, maybe you could say 7 game week periods. So this is why I chose or opted to have 5 game weeks. Hopefully that makes sense for you. And yeah, let's jump into what essentially is a tier list video for the fixtures of the Premier League this season. So first of all, we'll be looking at the overview of what the video structure looks like, and essentially it's 5 tiers of ratings from S to D. So tier lists videos are everywhere, all over YouTube, for different contexts, different categories, different subjects. FPL, it's not really been something that I've seen too often, so I thought I would shake it up and do something a little bit different for the fixture rating. But essentially it follows that same template, that there is an S being the best and D being the worst in terms of ratings. We'll have a fixture snapshot from each team, followed then by their rating placement. So we'll have a look at their next 5 game week fixtures, we'll kind of assess it, we'll talk about the team, talk about maybe a couple of assets, and then we'll place them into the tier list. The rating that I've given each team is also based on the overall fixture difficulty. You could probably take another step back or even forward and look at it from an attacking perspective only or a defensive perspective only. However, I feel like that could be 2 separate tier lists in its entirety, right? So I wanted to keep it just as an overall rather than make it more complex than it needs to be right now, especially for new players. Let's just keep it as an overall difficulty level in terms of the fixture. So let's have a look first of all at Arsenal. We will be going through Arsenal all the way through to Wolves in terms of alphabetical. There is no kind of preference here on which teams get placed first. But as you can see, Arsenal looking like they have got an absolute wonder run at the beginning here. They've got Forest at home, Fulham at home. They've got Manchester United at home as well in game week 4, which is a little bit trickier, but even their away fixtures against Crystal Palace and Everton in game weeks 2 and 5 respectively look very, very promising. So I'm going to take not even a wild guess here. I think it's a pretty educated guess that there are going to be at least 2 Arsenal assets in probably, I would say, most engaged managers' teams. In terms of the template, I don't see any reason why we would go with less than that. Could see someone like Ramsdale, depending on his price point, for example, from a defensive point of view. And then maybe we go for someone like Saka, Martinelli or Odegaard in that midfield. But again, I'll be interested to see on price points. I think that's going to be a theme of the video really here, is that price points will intertwine with how good the fixtures are for each team, right? We're going to need budget enablers. We're going to need kind of those mid-price players, and then of course our premiums as well. So it's going to be hard to completely determine how many assets of each team we want, but I do think with Arsenal it's going to be a minimum of at least 2, and they, for this reason, are going to go into the S tier straight off the bat. Highest tier of the group, in my opinion. I just think that they, last season they looked really, really strong. They were title contenders for the majority of the season. Of course, slipped up a couple of times towards the back end of the season, but I think Arteta's going to continue where he left off with Arsenal, back in the Champions League as well. So I think they're going to be a promising side once again next season. But let me know in the comments below if you agree, whether you're an Arsenal fan or not. Let me know what you think of their initial fixtures. Then if we have a look at Aston Villa, slightly rebranded logo. Apologies to any Villa fans if I've gone a little bit too early on this, but I've seen the rebranding has been shared. I'm not sure if it's going to go on the kit or anything else, but I haven't seen it kind of on the Premier League official website. So I don't know if it's been officially launched or not launched, but either way, it looks much better than it did before, much more modern. But that's what I'm going to be using moving forward anyway. So their fixtures are pretty good. I think, to be honest, on reflection, I did initially place them in a tier that maybe I've been a little bit harsh, maybe. Once I kind of focused on what game weeks 3 to 5 look like from Luton, Forest and Bournemouth there. That's a really good run of fixtures. I'd be very surprised if we don't see at least one Aston Villa asset make our teams. Maybe we go defensively. Maybe we go for someone like Mings as a budget enabler, or maybe even someone like Jacob Ramsey, for example, who could potentially be a kind of really budget midfielder option for us. Watkins, it'll be interesting to see what his price point is and if we can fit in a kind of 3-4-3 structure or go with those 3 forwards as an option. But generally speaking, I think, to be honest, it's a good run of fixtures for Villa here. And I think, as I say, on reflection, I've actually put them in the B tier. And I think on reflection, I probably could have bumped them up to A. Maybe you agree, maybe you disagree, but I just think with that run of fixtures there, I think really they are going to be a team that's on the up. We've seen how much they've been improved under Emery already, and I just think they're going to get stronger right this season, especially based on the transfer window. If they have a very, very good transfer window, could be a team to focus on. But anyway, we'll move on to Bournemouth now, one of the newly promoted sides from previous season. Very, very tough run for them here. Of course, you could argue West Ham game week 1, not a bad fixture, but then you look straight away, Liverpool, Tottenham, Brentford, Chelsea, game weeks 2 to 5. I do think Chelsea, you could argue maybe they can go down a little bit in terms of difficulty, with it being a home fixture as well. But I think Pochettino's going to hit the ground running, if I'm honest. He's got a lot of talented players to work with. I think it's about just getting them to gel. So that's a tricky fixture in game week 5. Brentford away is never easy. It wasn't easy last season. Or the season previous to that, to be honest. Tottenham at home, again, it's just Spurs, I think, under new management. I feel like they're going to want to push for top 4 once again. It has always been their aim, really, as a club, and obviously not made it last season, so I think that could be tricky. And then Liverpool in game week 2 away at Anfield. Very, very, very difficult fixtures, and I have no real choice. I think even for the budget options, I don't think we're going to be going anywhere near Bournemouth, so they go into the D tier for me. Then we move on to the Bs of Brentford here. Kind of mixed bag. I would say it's a pretty kind of average run because of the Tottenham and the Newcastle fixtures in game week 1 and 5. But I do like the possibility of having someone in the team from Brentford, even from game week 1 to 4 maybe. Newcastle away, we'll have to just see and maybe navigate that game week 5 based on Newcastle's performance, right? Because we know how solid they were at one point in the season. They started to kind of slip off at the back end of the season last season. So maybe it's better to just kind of own an asset from Brentford just from a purely attacking perspective, knowing that Newcastle, we could always bench them or we could always sell them anyway if the fixtures start to turn. So I like taking advantage of at least game weeks 2 to 4 here. I think with Ivan Toney being banned at least until January, we're safe in the knowledge that we could probably go for someone like Wissa or Mbeumo or one of those individuals that are going to be more than likely cheaper options and maybe capitalise on some attacking returns there for Brentford. So I really like their fixtures. Maybe I've been a little bit harsh again on here. I've gone straight through the middle with their placement. No pun intended, but they are in the B tier. I just honestly think that moving to the A tier, it just almost needs 4 really good. In fact, it needs 3 really good fixtures with a 4th one where it's kind of a 50-50. I think with Tottenham, you could argue that slots into there. But I think that Newcastle fixture again in game week 5 has just put me off a little bit to bumping them up. So I think I'm going to go straight through the middle there with the B tier for them. Next up, we've got the Seagulls of Brighton. Had a very, very strong season, of course, as we know, under De Zerbi. Some great FPL assets from Matoma, McAllister, March, all of which made sort of multiple teams last season. And game weeks 1 to 3 probably justifies owning maybe one of them, again, maybe based on price point here. Newcastle or Manchester United in game week 4 and 5, a little bit of a trickier run there. But ultimately, I do think that we'll probably see at least one asset from the Brighton boys in our teams. That being said, though, because of those fixtures in 4 and 5, I have gone straight down the middle with them and placed them in the B tier. Next up, we've got Burnley. Again, as mentioned, with Aston Villa, new rebranded logo for Burnley. So again, not sure if this is official or not, but I've seen it floating around, so decided I would also use it in my graphics. From game weeks 1 to 5 here for Burnley, I don't think it's an amazing start. It's not a terrible start for them. As the first newly promoted side we're covering, I think Manchester City in game week 1, obviously that doesn't get any harder. But then straight away followed up by Luton in game week 2 and Aston Villa at home in game week 3. So there is some balance there in terms of initial fixtures. Maybe we look at someone like a kind of a cheaper fullback option for them. Maybe someone like a Josh Brownhill, for example, in midfield. I know he's made kind of budget options before. I think really, again, though, it does determine if they are 4.5 million markers. That's when maybe I could get on board with getting one of these guys in the team. But really, I think for the most part, they're just more than likely going to be bench options, unfortunately, until we start seeing some run of form. So for that reason, I've just gone straight down the middle again with the B tier. I promise you, not everyone's fitting into the B tier here. We do have some more tiers coming up soon. So Chelsea next up then. A very, very difficult start to the kind of season for them last season. They had a real kind of tricky run of managerial problems. They bought a lot of players in the summer that didn't gel or fit into the team structure, in my opinion. They then went on a January transfer market spree as well, and also not really, in my opinion, strengthening the squad as a whole. They just decided to almost, it's like the owner kind of purchased Chelsea, went on an unlimited budget spree of Football Manager, right, and just decided to go and buy a bunch of players that he felt were good, rather than actually kind of scouting and looking what's going to fit into the structure of the team. That being said, though, under new management this season, I do think that they potentially will grow together, and they've got a very, very good amount of talented individuals that I think could probably take advantage of this fixture run. I mean, bar game week 1 here, game week 2 to game week 5 looks very, very promising. So who knows? Maybe we put someone in like a Mudryk or some kind of attacking option for Chelsea. Once we learn a little bit more, maybe in pre-season, on who seems to be the nailed starting 11 for the new manager. So for that reason, I am going to take a bit of a gamble, and I'm going to say these go into the A tier for me. And like I say, I think I'm probably going to take maybe one risk based on, again, price point. It keeps being the buzzword of this video, but based on price points of the players, I think if we get a fair midfielder price for someone of Chelsea, then maybe I take the punt for the first few game weeks on one of them. Moving into Crystal Palace next up. Again, a little bit of a mixed bag there because of the Arsenal at home fixture, Brentford away, a little bit tricky in game weeks 2 and 3. Game weeks 1 and 4 look okay, so maybe I could get on board with someone like an Eze, one kind of budget option, maybe in the striker position as well if we ever needed it. But the reality is I can't see them really making the template at the beginning. I think if there is ever a fixture swing that happens, yes, we probably could look at someone like Eze, maybe Elise as well. Both of them very promising attacking assets, in my opinion, on the back end of last season. Eze probably a little bit more than Elise, but still both of them have very, very good attacking threat. I just don't think that game week 1 onwards would be where I start with Palace. That being said, because of that kind of mixed bag, they do just kind of meet that middle criteria for me, and they go straight through the middle again in that B tier. We then have a look at Everton, of course, narrowly surviving last season and sticking in the Premier League for one more season at least. I do feel like, that they weren't playing entirely negative football under Sean Dyche, which was kind of good to see. They did, of course, thrash Brighton. I think it was 5-1 at that point, and obviously bagged those 3 points there. They had some kind of miserable results, I suppose, under him as well, though. So it wasn't all, kind of shining and fantastic. It was some doom and gloom in there as well, but they managed to survive. And those first 4 game weeks are looking very, very promising for them. They play Sheffield United away in game week 4, so one of the newly promoted sides. Wolves at home, Fulham at home. I mean, Goodison Park is kind of a little bit of a 12th man for Everton, more times than not, right? So I think if we take a look at them, maybe there is one attacking player, maybe one defensive option that we would look at instead. I think Calvert-Lewin is maybe a little bit out of the spectrum. He's not really had a consistent season this season through injuries, and I think that's probably going to carry on. It seems to have been kind of, he peaked in his career, I suppose you could say, a couple of seasons ago, and it just never seems to have got better since. Damari Gray has been linked with a move to the Saudi League, so maybe he doesn't stick around. But if he does stick around, he could easily be priced at maybe that similar price to last season as Neto, that 5.5, maybe 5 million midfielder that potentially we take advantage of and we slot into our teams for these 4 game weeks here. even maybe just stick with him in game week 5 for that Arsenal fixture as well. But even with the bad performances that they had last season, and of course just where they finished, I'm still going to place them in the A tier based on those fixtures. I think that we're not going to go crazy on owning too many assets from them. I think one is probably enough, but I still think that that they're going to provide maybe some budget options for us, which is always good on the initial template. Moving through to Fulham next up, a little bit of a tricky run here in the middle. You can see Brentford, Arsenal, and City from game weeks 2 to 4. Really not positive about them, to be honest. I don't think we'll see the likes of Andreas Pereira stay at 4.5 million. I don't really see them as a team that we want to target. I don't recall actually owning anyone other than Pereira. I don't think I owned Mitrovic even through his purple patch last season. I think I only own Pereira as a Fulham asset. They're a team that they did quite well last season, which is kind of weird, really, that maybe we didn't own as many FPL assets as we could have with them, but their goals were spread a little bit. Willian seemed to sort of go and have a 16-pointer one week, then Andreas would have his turn of sort of like a 10-12-pointer. Mitro would then throw in his piece. You had even Polinia from the deeper role sort of providing goals and assists and points as well. So it just seemed to be that the points were spread. There was never kind of one asset particularly that we could focus on. And I think a mix of that plus the fixture run for this season as well, I've got no choice really to put them in the same category as Bournemouth, and that is in that D category. Moving forward to Liverpool then, I do think that this is a team that we're going to be looking at again. I think especially with Trent's more advanced midfielder role, I'd be very, very surprised if we'd see him recategorised as a midfielder. I would very, very highly anticipate him, to be honest, to be a defender still, and maybe still priced at 7.5 million. We saw the best of him at the back end of last season. We've seen it in an England shirt as well now. And I really do think that Klopp's going to be continuing to play him in that role. It seems to suit him very well. His vision is absolutely impeccable. So I think he's going to be a must-own for me personally. Maybe Salah could be one of the premium options, but I would like to almost look at kind of the Diaz price, maybe the Gakpo price, because, and even Jota to some degree, there is a little bit of rotation in that attack, which is a bit of a shame because Salah seems to be the most nailed on. But Diaz at the beginning of the season, last season, really was quite electrifying. So let's just see how that plays out. But I do think there's going to be at least 2 Liverpool assets in the template. And I really have no choice but to put them in, of course, a very, very strong tier here in tier A because of that fixture run. I think it's looking very, very positive for them. So I do think at least 1 or 2 assets will be on our radar. And then second promoted club for this season in Luton Town. Obviously massive for the club to have reached the Premier League. Absolutely huge for them in their history, and just the progress that they've made as a club is really something to behold. So congratulations to them first and foremost. But I think really when you look at the kind of, for a newly promoted club to see this fixture run, I think that's probably not as best as it can get. But you've only got Brighton as that tricky fixture, in my opinion. In terms of the kind of top clubs, yes, Fulham did finish really quite positively, I suppose, in terms of the rankings last season. Nobody maybe would have anticipated a top half finish. Brighton certainly, of course, making Europe. I think that's got to be the trickiest fixture of the lot. Then you've got Burnley at home, West Ham at home in 2 and 4. I really could see Luton Town maybe offering us at least one budget option that we could even be tempted to play in some of these fixtures, right? So, even though I don't know much about them, I don't know much about the club, I don't know much about the assets within the Championship. I haven't done enough kind of sort of analysis, I suppose, of what the assets are capable of. I still think one of them might make my starting 11, and I think that the A tier is fully justified based on those fixtures alone. Then going on to the treble winners of Manchester City, I think I said it at the beginning of last season that I felt like Haaland was going to give them that extra layer of kind of missing prowess that they needed, right? The chances they created with that false number 9 situation prior to him arriving, I just felt like it was the missing piece for them. And lo and behold, they go and win the treble. They match their neighbours from all those years ago, and well deserved, to be honest. Won the league, won the FA Cup, won the Champions League. Absolutely fantastic season. And then you look at the fixtures that they've been given as well for the first 5. Like, other than Newcastle in game week 2, which you could say, I mean, I've put it as a pink fixture there. It is still at home. Like, I think we saw a 3-3 thriller at one point. I can't remember whether that was at St James's Park or the Etihad, but we could easily have something similar. But I think, just looking at this, there's going to be a minimum of 2 Manchester City assets. I'm not too sure I would stretch to 3, just again, because Pep Roulette is always something to keep your eye on. But I genuinely think that Haaland's almost a no-brainer. It's a shame that it's going to be like that, because I think the first 5 game weeks, there's not really going to be much captaincy debating or decisions. Maybe game week 2, you could go for a little bit of a differential if you think that Newcastle will defensively, kind of shut him out or do well. But when you've got 2 newly promoted sides in Burnley and Sheffield United in game weeks 1 and 3, I feel like Haaland's the automatic captain, and you're probably going to look at one of the other attackers as well. Maybe someone like a Jack Grealish comes into the mix as well. Now we know De Bruyne as well, of course, is out for game week 1. Lots of different options, I think, for us, but ultimately they have also got to be in the S tier with their second place rivals, Arsenal. Looking then at the neighbours, Manchester United, I think, we've got a little bit of a mixed bag here, in my opinion. I think Arsenal away in game week 4 is definitely not an easy fixture. Same for Tottenham away in game week 2. They're a little bit tricky, in my opinion. Wolves and Forest in game week 1 and 3 at Old Trafford is fantastic. So I do still feel like I probably will end up having one asset, more than likely an attacker, because Tottenham away, I think there's still possible goals there. The Brighton at home fixture, though, I think is one that's being a little bit overlooked, which is just swung me a little bit to the lower side of the tiers, or that kind of middle area, as opposed to the higher end. I'll be interested to see, again, what we do in the transfer market, but I think maybe an asset to think about that didn't necessarily perform from an FPL point of view last season is Bruno Fernandes. I think across the Premier League last season, he was the top for big chances created and chances created, which says a lot about us as a club, because we haven't had really an out-and-out number 9 for a long time now. Martial doesn't seem to be able to keep fit. Of course, Weghorst just never really fit the bill entirely in terms of a goal scorer. Yes, Rashford can play there, but I don't think that Bruno capitalises on his ability in that role. I think he capitalises much more when he plays on the left-hand side. So I think as long as we get a number 9, whether it be Harry Kane or Højlund, for example, I think, as long as we find somebody that is that kind of, sits in the box, understands where to go, and has very good movement, I think Bruno has the capacity to be able to find them. And also as well, it's not to least to mention the fact that he's on penalties and he also can score a goal himself. So I think maybe between Rashford and Fernandes, it's going to be a close call between them, and maybe they're very similarly priced as well, which will be interesting. But I do think United will probably have at least one asset in the template based on those fixtures. But as mentioned, straight through the middle for me personally, I think they make the B tier. Then we go on to Newcastle here with City, Liverpool and Brighton in that middle. I'm not so sure that we actually start with any Newcastle assets. I mean, Trippier potentially goes up as high as 6.5 million as a starting price point this season. He was 5 million. To put that into perspective, he was, absolutely amazing for his price point at the beginning of last season. For the bonus points that he racks up, everything else that he delivered, a couple of goals as well, assists, just everything was there for him. I pretty much owned him, I think, for the entire season last season. I never sold him once. And I think, to be honest, it's going to be hard pressed to justify bringing him in for this run of fixtures. I think that Villa and Brentford, yes, they're at home fixtures in game week 1 and 5, but they're still not easy clubs to turn over or to deny goals. And then, of course, you look at that game week 2 to 4 fixtures; they're very tricky. So I don't think I have any real option other than to put them in the C tier. Sorry, I think that they have got the capability. Of course, they finished in the top 4. They've got the capability to overcome some of those trickier fixtures. But I still think that from a FPL asset perspective, got to place them in that lower tier, unfortunately, which is a shame, because I think a lot of us would have liked to have owned Trippier again. Then we move on to Forest. Of course, survived the promotion last season, and that run of fixtures doesn't look like a very positive start for them, unfortunately. Arsenal away. Yes, they've got the newly promoted side of Sheffield United at home in game week 2, but then it follows with United and Chelsea in game weeks 3 and 4. Away fixtures for Arsenal, Man United and Chelsea in those first 4 game weeks. That is very hard to justify. I think any asset coming in, maybe Morgan Gibbs-White, for example, if you want a budget enabler and you want to play someone in game week 2 and 5, maybe that's a good shout. 2 home games. But other than that, I really don't see us potentially owning anybody from Forest. And just on those fixtures alone, I've had to put them in the D tier alongside the other promoted sides from last season of Fulham and Bournemouth, would you believe? So, yeah, interesting. Then finally, the third newly promoted season to the Premier League this season, we have Sheffield United. A bit of a kind of mixed bag again, really. City in game week 3 is, of course, always going to be a bit of a red flag. Them and Arsenal, if any of your teams kind of playing them, it's always going to be a hard one to navigate, or you have to maybe consider benching them for that game. Tottenham in game week 5, again, maybe a 50-50 match there. But Palace, Forest, Everton, strong fixtures there. So bit of a mixed bag for them. I don't know enough about their assets overall to justify putting them in I think, a bit of a higher position here. Long gone are the days, I think, of a Lundstrom masterclass in terms of budget options. So I think I'm going to stick them in a C tier for now, but I do think they're going to be ones to watch for possible options. Then moving on to Spurs, we actually do have an interesting kind of game week 1 and 2 here. Maybe this will be a bit controversial for where I've decided to place them, but I think Brentford away, yes, is always going to be a little bit of a tricky fixture. Then you've got Man United at home. So they're not the best starting fixtures, if I'm honest. However, I do see goals in these games. So I do think from an attacking point of view, if you have Harry Kane still at Spurs, based on his consistency last season, and I do think his price point is going to be a premium of 12.5 million, I think that he's justifiable to own across those first 5 game weeks. I think he could easily score in those first few games. And then from game weeks 3 to 5, that's a really strong run. Bournemouth, Burnley and Sheffield United, absolutely fantastic for them. So I think that on that basis, even if you took Kane out of the equation and even put someone like Son, who I think is going to be a heavily reduced price based on his performance last season, I think he could be an option. If you take Kane out of the mix, then maybe he becomes that, more kind of focused talisman for Spurs, and we see him kick on once again. So controversially, I'm going to put them in the S tier. I just think that those first few fixtures have goals in them, and from game weeks 3 to 5, I really don't think they get better than that. So maybe they justified them more or they justified themselves more in the A tier, but I've just bumped them up just because I know what level of consistency can come from their attackers every so often. Then we've got West Ham United next up. Obviously, fantastic season for them, not only surviving, but also winning a European trophy for the first time in decades. So fantastic for them. And of course, they face a bit of, again, a mixed bag of teams here. They've got Brighton, they've got City, tricky fixtures, absolutely, in 3 and 5. But they do play Bournemouth and Luton in game week 1 and 4. So maybe, again, once we understand price points, we can then start shaping who rotates very well, because in game weeks 1 and 4, I would even maybe look to playing somebody like Ben Rama, for example, maybe a Jared Bowen based on his price point, but I wouldn't maybe stretch to any more than one asset for West Ham. So they're not fantastic fixtures. They're not the best. That's why they've gone straight through, run-of-the-mill, middle of the park here in the B tier. And last but not least, we have Wolves with, unfortunately, yes, it is a little bit of a difficult run here. They've got Man United away, they've got Brighton at home and Liverpool at home in game weeks 2 and 5, with then Everton and Crystal Palace away fixtures in 3 and 4, which aren't easy. I mean, I've put them as the easiest coloured fixture here, but that's just based on, I guess, kind of finish for last season and kind of performances overall. I think this is going to be a very, very difficult choice to bring one of their assets in from game week 1. I don't think we're going to see kind of a repeat of a budget enabler like a Neto, or even just one of their defenders. Maybe you slot in a 4 miller, someone like Totti, for example, if he starts playing, if he gets the 4 million price point again, maybe he's bench fodder and can come in at game week 3 and 4 if there's any injuries or upsets. But overall, I really think they're going to be an avoid. And for that reason, I have placed them in the C tier just because they have got those two kind of half positive fixtures, I guess you could say, in game weeks 3 and 4. But that's it. That is the tier list in front of us, guys. That's going to wrap it up. I mean, pretty evenly spread overall. Like if you kind of look at it from top down, you've got 3 in the S tier, 3 in the D tier. We've then got 4 in A, 3 in C, and then of course a kind of fair share of 7 clubs in the B tier. Which I think, if you look at that from a kind of, I suppose, an organisational perspective from the Premier League, I feel like they've done a pretty good job in making it relatively fair, I suppose, or spread across all 20 teams here. But I do think that on this basis, like I say, once we've got this analysis in place to refer to, I think this is going to be a video that you check back to just to check which teams look like they've got the best run of fixtures, and how then do we manipulate the best kind of use of that 100 million budget that we'll have when the game launches. So I do think we're going to see 2 Arsenal, 2 City, 2 Liverpool, just as kind of a framework. So you've got at least 6 out of your 15 players there. Then you may have a punt in a Chelsea. You may have a punt on a Manchester United asset, for example. And then you've got those run-of-the-mill kind of Luton, Burnley, maybe even Brentford assets that I think are going to definitely be floating around. You could maybe throw Everton in the mix as well based on the tier placement here. You'll see a couple of budget enablers, but it's really hard to tell at this stage, guys. So I don't want to deep dive too much without having, like I say, confirmation really of the prices and the player positions. So yeah, feel free to refer back to this video, and I hope you enjoyed it. It's going to wrap it up for this one. As I say, I hope you enjoyed it and found it valuable. It is the first content I've put out for this season, slightly rebranded a little bit as well. So feel free to give your opinion on the overall look of the content. We've made it kind of a deeper purple and a bit more in line with the official Premier League branding as well. But of course, yeah, let me know in the comments below if you'd like anything changed or improved. Of course, this season as well, as I say, it's the first video for this season. There should be a game launch coming next week. Maybe some player price reveals later on this week, which I'll maybe do some reacts to. Maybe put together, of course, a first drafts video next week. But the content will be coming thick and fast very, very soon, guys. So look forward to that. If you are new to the channel and you did like what you see today, like I say, plenty of content up and coming. So feel free to subscribe to the channel. I'll be by your side, supporting you through the journey of FPL throughout this season. And of course as well, just to give you an update on overall for the community and what I'm doing with the channel, I've started to build a Discord server. I won't be sharing that invitation just yet, but I've started to build one just to add an extra layer of engagement for you all as a community. So even if you want to ask questions amongst yourselves, there's got some automation in there, including kind of statistic bots and stuff like that. But I want to do some tests first to make sure it's as kind of foolproof as possible before I share that with you. So something to look forward to for the longer term viewers and anybody that's new to the community and interested in Discord. So again, thank you very much for all the support last season. It was a fantastic season overall. Very, very happy with my 60k finish, the best finish I've ever had, which is nothing to be sniffed at. And of course, looking forward to improve on that this season, guys. So thanks very much for watching. Apologies for the long video as the first one, but hopefully it was valuable and enjoyable for you. And I will see you in another video soon. Take care.